You're listening to the Hal and Steve English podcast, a comfy place to talk about all the great and not so great parts of teaching ESL abroad. I'm Steve, and I've got Hal here too.
Howdy.
Today we're talking with Hal, Hal Thomason Wiley. That's our boy's full name. Today we're going to ask him about how he ended up becoming an ESL teacher abroad and specifically what his first year was like. So stay tuned. All right. So before I ask you all these wonderful questions, Hal, I've got to let all these listeners know about our teacher membership. Go to howandslevenglish.com, sign up for your first free month of teacher membership, and you can download all of our beautiful, beautiful printable card games, board games, conversation lessons for children, and conversation lessons for adults. Go ahead, check it out. Let me know what you think. And if you have any questions, just email us. All right, Hal. Um, let's get into it. So you are an ESL teacher abroad, obviously.
Yes, sir.
How'd you get into it?
I guess I just graduated with a bachelor's in psychology and really took off from the U.S. Like as quick as I graduated.
And where were you going to university?
I went to UAH in Alabama. It's a big engineering school.
When you were there, did you ever travel abroad to study, or were you ever interested in going abroad at all?
Yeah, I guess I started traveling late in elementary school. So my mom took me to a few places like Costa Rica and Spain. So I definitely knew that I wanted to get back abroad.
Cool. So that was like a big motivation for you then.
Yeah, I wouldn't say, yeah, you could say motivation. It was just, I guess I just knew I was unhappy in the U.S. And if I hadn't been to some other places in the world, I kind of just would accepted that things were kind of crappy, and that I had a, you know, I maybe would have accepted going into debt, studying 2 to 4 more years, or, working that first kind of crappy job. But I was thinking, I guess, kind of differently.
Cool. So how did you figure out that you could go teach abroad?
Yeah, I was pretty clueless, I guess, and I just had a cousin that mentioned that she had a friend. I mentioned that I wanted to work abroad, and she mentioned she had a friend that was teaching in Korea and that they absolutely loved it.
Yeah, and for our listeners, I might be a little closed-minded, but I really can imagine folks coming to Korea to teach English before when I did because it was so popular when I came, or it's just beginning to become popular. So anybody that came before 2013 or 2012, I feel like that was kind of like an unknown situation for people. There wasn't really as much information out there. So what was that like for you, and how did your family and your friends talk about coming abroad to teach?
Yeah, I guess it was kind of still under the radar at that point, and I'm from a small town in Tennessee, so I think everybody was just encouraging. They were, they were all. They're always. I think people in a small town are always happy when somebody gets to escape, go to the big world out there. So everybody was pretty supportive. Of course, they knew absolutely nothing about Korea. They at that point, people didn't know South Korea existed. At least in a lot of the southern U.S., we just knew that North Korea existed because they always would cover that in the media.
So I think in a previous podcast you told us about your wild tale of that long plane flight and then your first day here. Could you recount that a bit for us?
Yeah, I just as I mentioned last time, I didn't know anybody here. I didn't know the language, and when I arrived, they had lost all my luggage. So it was started off with a pretty mad scramble. I just got off the plane, and there's an old guy holding a little cardboard sign with my name on it, and it was a bit of a tussle with him because he's trying to figure out why I didn't have any luggage, but I didn't know what the heck he was trying to say. Finally got into his taxi, and it's about over a 3-hour ride, which I'd never been in a taxi before, and that was kind of unheard of. So I didn't know what was happening after I went over the 3-hour mark. And yeah, and he dropped me off in front of a school, and there was a big banner and a bunch of people standing out in front of the school.
So there's a welcome banner just for you?
Yes, there was.
Oh, that's awesome. So what happened after that?
I was their only their second English teacher ever. Pardon me, what'd you say? What happened after that?
Yeah, let me give a quick warning to our listeners. I apologize. We are in the PC Bong yet again, so you're going to hear people yelling at their video games and people throwing back a few drinks, possibly. So it just adds to the ambiance, like I like to say. And if you're good at Korean, you can probably understand what they're saying. But yeah, I was asking, what happened at that when you first arrived?
Yeah. You want to hear about the rest of that day, or just my?
Yeah, just with that day. Like, so you're in
Yeah.
the taxi, you're getting out. You know, it's a completely new situation. 3 hours in
Yeah.
your first taxi, in your first, time being a teacher abroad.
Well, and this was 10 to 20 kilometers from North Korea. It was the town right there on the border. The only thing in the town was a small Korean army base because it's right there at the border. So it's kind of a poor countryside area. I didn't know it at the time, but they had the lowest test scores in the country in this little county. So to be honest, when I was looking out the window that last hour, the stuff that I saw reminded me of when I was in Costa Rica, which I was in a poor area in Costa Rica, and so yeah, I didn't realize it didn't seem like a developed country at that time and place. So I was in that kind of setting, and then yeah, I didn't have any clothes or anything. I'd been wearing the same clothes for about 3 days, and they wanted to take me out to dinner. Like I said, they were standing in front of the school there, so they shuffled me to a restaurant, and I had to take off my shoes and get in a small room with them on the floor, and that was very, very embarrassing. That the whole room there had to smell my feet, but I didn't. If I had a choice, I was not aware of it.
Oh man, that's beautiful. That's the best. So, what was the first dinner like? That's got me really interested.
That is all gone. All I remember is that bit there, like having to take my shoes off, and I'm sure it was a super awkward dinner, but I don't remember. But I could also add, they took me, since I didn't have any clothes. My co-teacher took me to buy a bunch of clothes. Turns out, none of which fit me. I have kind of a long arms and long legs, and as you know, the clothes here, they don't make them the same, so they didn't quite fit me.
So that night they put you in your apartment, right? What was that like? What was
Yeah.
your first impression?
Well, he took me on that quick shopping run to buy all those clothes, and then dropped me off at the actually it's called a Satek. It's a school-owned apartment. The public school owns it, and so I was so far out in the countryside that they have these little deals for the teachers so they can live there right at the school, because there's not, I guess, that good of a housing out there. So I was literally living about 20 to 30 feet from the school. The building was just right behind it that I lived in. So I loved that. I just walked over to my apartment, and it was kind of a pretty big sized studio. Had a pretty nice view of the mountains, and I loved it. Like, I wanted to get away, so I was just a piece of heaven out there, away from everybody and everything.
So you've made it over here. You survived a 3-hour taxi ride. You had that awkward, shoeless dinner with your coworkers, and you're at home. What happened on the next day?
The next day was Buddha's birthday. So I know Rhett said he had the World Cup. He got here for. I got here for Buddha's birthday, and I was pretty excited about that. So my first day was off, and yeah, I apologize. I don't really know what happened on that day, or
It must have been a really good day then.
yeah, I just chilled out, recovered from the jet lag.
Now, when I first got here, even though I was in a big city, I was pretty scared because I didn't really know how to communicate to people back home that had arrived. I didn't even know really even how to find a PC bong, internet cafe to even talk to people. And I was really scared of using English because I didn't know how rude that would be. But you were out really, really in the sticks. You were about an hour away from the closest city that even had an internet cafe, right?
Yeah, I think even back then I was jumping Wi-Fi from the school because, again, I was so close. I think the school had Wi-Fi, maybe. I think I just hopped onto their Wi-Fi there and got an email out, and I was all good.
So what did that first month look like for you? Tell us about, how you adapted to the new culture, how you adapted to the new setting, and tell us about the relationships and the people you got to know at school.
Well, the school and the teachers were all just absolutely thrilled to have me there, because it's really hard to, at that time, they had a fixation on getting a young American teacher, but I guess typically young Americans wanted to go to Seoul or the big city, or they definitely didn't want to go in a small town out next to the demilitarized zone there next to North Korea. I didn't really care. And they gave me a bonus pay because of that. So I guess you could say, like, from the starting point, they're really thankful, treated me really well. I had a amazing co-teacher, like, really experienced. A lot of the best teachers will go out to those deep countryside struggling schools, and they get a lot of credit or points in their system to become head teachers or principals. So they'll purposely send, like, veteran really qualified teachers out to those schools. So I had a great co-teacher. I shadowed him for a week. And then they said, they gave me a classroom, just my classroom. And they said, teach. And I had thought that I would be teaching with somebody. But yeah, I really struggled. I had no skills or idea how to teach whatsoever.
Oh, so they gave you a little rope-a-dope too. They they got you there and then set you loose in the classroom by yourself. So you said you had Wi-Fi though at that school, which is interesting because it was in the countryside.
Well, yeah, Korea. I mean, they're pretty wired as far as the internet goes, even out in the countryside.
So when you realized you were going to be teaching, what were your first steps?
Well, I was pretty well provisioned. I also had a big screen TV. I had 2 curriculums, and so they gave me a teacher's book, and I just followed that. I taught the curriculum really badly.
Wow, I didn't know that you had a curriculum or a
Yeah,
coursebook to use.
actually the same one. You probably know it. It's, I think even back then, I think it was Let's Go.
Really?
Yeah, and I should say the other problem was they started me out at 30 hours teaching hours a week, which was great pay, but yeah, I also was teaching an after school program, which was with JET, some kind of a test prep book. So I taught that to the after school classes.
Wow, so it sounds like your first month of classes were pretty rough.
Really, yeah, really rough. I really struggled for probably the entire first year was really hard for me. I um I was really bad at behavioral management, especially the younger they got. Like the kindergarten kids were just like little animals running around to me. I had no clue what to do.
So besides the teaching aspect, what was that first month like for you with the coworkers and the relationships you developed and getting to know not only the countryside in Korea, but the rest of this new home country that you have?
So they have the huishik, or the dinner culture, drinking, work dinner drinking culture. So I just kind of, my co-teacher was pretty cool. I hung out with him. We'd go out, eat and drink once or twice a week, and that was really enough for me. I would just kind of, it was kind of an adventure just to get on a bus. There's only one bus out there really, and kind of explore that county. Just like finding a grocery store out that far was like a big adventure. At that time, there was no convenience stores. There was no 7-Eleven, anything like that. So I just had like it felt like I said, it felt kind of like a third world country. It was kind of an adventure. And my co-teacher was like, "Hey, there's some foreign teachers around here. Some other foreign teachers. Would you like me to introduce you?" And I was like, "Yeah, that'd be really cool." So he drove me into town, and that's where I met old Andrew Berquist of Arkansas. He'd been here. He was the first teacher in that entire area, and yeah, he was just from a different world. He'd come even way earlier than I had, and there was a crew of like 20 teachers from around the world that we were all put out at these random little far countryside towns, but they put all the teachers together in this little hub, this kind of small town. Like I said, there wasn't any housing out in the sticks, so they put these kind of 20 teachers in this small little town together. Um, America, South Africa, Canada, New Zealand, Ireland. So you've got like all these young expats way out in the sticks, randomly stuck together, and so that was just a wonderful kind of adventure to like getting into trouble, exploring the country with those guys, and the first night they took me to a noraebang, or a singing room. Got pretty drunk. We got a pretty big room. There's 20 of us crowded in there, and that night I was like, this is pretty wild.
Oh, that's great. So how long into your trip before you met the foreigner group?
That was probably in the first week or two.
Wow.
Yeah, my co-teacher really took care of me, and as you know, like that's kind of what I was about afterwards. Like the foreigners out there, we really took care of each other and reached out and had a welcome dinner. They had a welcome dinner for me. They always had a welcome dinner for any new teacher in the area, and showed them the ropes.
Yeah, not to sound like old fogies, but we constantly, or we seem to pretty pretty often talk about the fact that it kind of changed the culture of when a new teacher would come, you get to introduce them around and take care of them. It doesn't really seem to be that way nowadays. People just avoid you.
Yeah, it's definitely a different feeling. If I approach somebody in the street now, that's another foreigner. It's kind of like, um, I guess, kind of like it would be in the U.S. Like if I were to approach a stranger, they'd just be like, kind of wary, like, "What's up? What's this guy? What's this guy trying to talk to me?"
Definitely, definitely. So I remember when you lived there, you picked up a few hobbies that I think were pretty much things that you could do on your own and really things that complemented the countryside, right? So you stacked up a huge library of books and you're just constantly reading. And I think you told me about mountain hiking as well. Can you tell me about what your lifestyle was like in that really isolated countryside town?
Yeah. So, yeah, I love that. I read a ton, um, just because I'd get off at 5, and I lived there right behind the school, so it just made sense to go home and chill and do some reading. So, and yeah, I had a good bit of that, and then the last bus to get where I lived was like from the nearest small city there, Jungo, where you have the academy. I had to catch a bus from there by 10 p.m. So even if I was like in Dongducheon where the subway starts, I had to leave Dongducheon by like uh 9 8 or 9 p.m. just to get home. And if I didn't, then I would have had to take a taxi way out there. So I just did my own thing on the weekdays, but on the weekend I would just have to leave for the whole weekend. So I would, because like I said, if even if I went out to 9 p.m., I wouldn't be able to get back home. So I would just grab a backpack and one of those one of those other expats in the nearby town, good old John Moscardo, and we'd go to Seoul, go to Hongdae, go to the clubs, go dancing. Um, yeah, sometimes we'd go hiking in the mountains. Uh, we'd go on to music festivals, go on little trips, weekend trips, and then I'd come straggling back on late Sunday night.
Well, that's great. So after that point, so after that first month, how did your classroom life develop? So you said the first year was rough. Can you just remember and tell us about some anecdotes about that first year and maybe some of the things that you learned or discovered during that first year about teaching?
Well, yeah, I guess the government implemented that public school program where they brought in us native teachers, and around that time was when Weiguk, the website, was born, and there weren't that many tools around. The tool that was around that everybody was using at that time was PowerPoint. So I just spent a ton of time making like PowerPoint games and PowerPoint, um, review stuff, and there was just a ton of collaboration and some really great stuff that came out of that, um, on Weiguk. And I like to this day I see a lot of Korean teachers like pulling stuff from that like time, like 8 to 10 years ago, and it just blows away. These incredible animated Mario games, or Zelda, you know, uh, Pokemon, and yeah. So yeah, I spent most of my time building that stuff to kind of survive in the classroom, to keep the kids engaged.
Great, great. And just for listeners to know, remember when the PC bongs, you're gonna get some cameos of excited screams and shouts about killing somebody in battlegrounds. It's the ambiance. All right. So I remember that time too. Those games coming around. What did you do, and do you remember any specific things that you made for class at that time?
Yeah, I just took a page from them, and I learned how to build those games with PowerPoint. And there for the first year, I did anything and everything, like things I'd be ashamed to do now, like crossword puzzles, um, word searches, just any. I tried anything and everything that first year that I could find. So I did some creative stuff, and I also did just like printing anything and everything I could find. There was no Hal and Steve English at that point.
Very true. And you mentioned classroom management. I think that's something that many teachers kind of struggle with as they continue to teach because I don't know, it just seems like people forget like the basics as they continue teaching. They forget that, oh, I should have like a cool down period at the beginning of class to make everybody calm down and sit down and get ready to focus. Or what did you learn and what are the skills that you took from classroom management?
Yeah, I guess I came up with a really good, I think, behavioral management um, system, and that's only because I was in a sink or swim situation for a few years there, uh, and to this day, like I've been to teach in like big, uh, big chain hagwons, even in Seoul, and they're doing stuff like they have a sheet with a little stamp system, and the kid gets like 200 stamps, and they give them this little rinky-dinky plastic toy, and they don't really have any kind of system in place. They've got like some basic rules and some basic structure, but yeah, I learned the most important thing is you can't let them speak Korean. So was my first rule. You can't speak Korean in the classroom. No shouting. Stay in your seat. Staying in your seat is incredibly important because even while you're learning to teach, because you don't know what you're doing yet, if you can at least keep them in their seats, it looks like you know what you're doing. So that'll give you that 3-month window to figure out what the heck you're doing if you're one of those people that's ended up at one of these random hagwons and they've just thrown you in the shark tank there and you don't know what to do. That's a start. So stay in your seat, no Korean, no shouting, and no touching. 5 stars on the board. Make it don't make it individual. Make it a classroom punishment. So anybody speaks Korean, the whole classroom loses a star collectively. After they lose a few stars, the majority of the students will be on your side, on the teacher's side, to rein the rest of the students in, because you'll also have a reward system in place. And I had a Pokemon dollar system I created, which they could trade the dollars to get like 10 of the same Pokemon and trade that in, and they had different prizes. You need a cheap prize there just for the kids that can't save their money, and then you need something for the kids that like to save to build up to. Yeah, and I started to put together a behavioral management kind of program like that, and I got better at it.
I bring that up because you showed me this video today of your classroom and you were playing a game and the kids were gesturing and using body language and TPR for different phrases and different vocab words without giving you any no jam teacher, this isn't fun teacher. And it seems like you not only manage the classroom really well, you get them to actually enjoy it. And so I think that's some skill that you really must have been developing for years.
Yeah, it really, like, it took me, maybe that's just my personality. I think a lot of people pick it up faster than me, but those first 3 years, those kids really lost out on English. I learned way more than they did. I had no idea what I was doing. what you've seen of me is it took actually longer than 3 years, 4 to 5 years to really find my footing.
So how did your life change during that first year? So you've told us about the classroom, and you told us about the first month, and what you kind of did with your new expat community. What did the rest of that year look like for you?
What the Sorry, frame that for me once again.
You've already told us about your first month
Hmm.
and what Korea was like, and then how your business life was like, or your teaching life was like, and how your social life was. And then you've also told us kind of how your classroom developed in that first year.
Hmm.
Can you tell us more about just how your life changed in that first year?
Um, yeah, I guess it was really great for me personally. I spent a lot of time alone, and that was good after 4 years of 5 years of college, and um, I yeah, I it was a good time in my life, and my family and everybody was wondering, well, when are you going to come back home? And I never once thought of going back home once I got settled in there. So I was yeah, I just got really plugged in, and I didn't learn the language um until several years later, but I kind of made that my it was very much my home.
So I think you asked me a similar question before. When that year was coming to an end, what did you think you were going to do?
Oh, yeah, 100%. I was going to stay at that school. Um it was just really hard to leave because everybody I talked to at the other public schools, they were like, Hal, you have got it made. Like, I had the best job of anybody I met, even when I went to those big, conferences. My school just really took care of me, uh, because they were just so. I think it had taken them a long time to even get a teacher to go out there. Um, and so during the summer, which I've mentioned this to you in the past, like, a lot of teachers had to desk warm. I did not have to go in. They paid me for 3 months, and I didn't have to set foot into school. They just said, stay nearby in case somebody checks or something comes up, and then you can hop over here, because I was supposed to be at the school. But as you know, we're not Korean teachers, so we didn't actually have any paperwork or anything to do. But they made most teachers just kind of sit there and sweat that summer out in the classroom. So, I mean, you know, 3 months paid vacation, and yeah, I couldn't imagine giving that up.
Yeah, that's incredible. The 3 month vacation is great. Did you ever use that for anything?
Um, yeah, well, so I had maybe 2 months there in the summer altogether, and then you know how it is, they split it up, and then I had a month or two in the winter, and then I also had like 2 or 3 weeks. I would just travel around Korea, Gangwon-do and Busan. We went on, but I didn't leave Korea. I would go back to the U.S. for 1 week every year as well.
Oh, someone just got the video game, in case anybody was wondering. Nice little cameo from the PC Bong residents. So, can you tell us a little bit about what your family members, what the people back home were telling you at that point in time? Because I think it's pretty common that we all get these little tugs on us to come back to the real world, to come back home and hang out with me, man.
Well, yeah, my family was afraid I was gonna die because North Korea was sending over randomly shooting little missiles, this and that, and the news in the U.S. was like South Korea is gonna go to war. But I'd talk to my coworkers. I'd be like, "We're right here at the, we're in the right next to the demilitarized zone. You know, they just shot a missile back home. They're saying y'all are gonna go to war," and my coworkers were just like, "Nah, we've been at war for decades. There's nothing to worry about." So there was really a disconnect there. I couldn't convince anybody back home that I wasn't in a super dangerous situation, when actually, I felt like it was much more dangerous where I came from, other than chilling out, out in the rice fields out in that small town. There was that, and then I just told my friends back home, "This is amazing. You guys got to come out here, check this out." So a lot of my friends came and visited me, and that was pretty cool. So I didn't really get the tug from friends to get back, but my family would bother me.
I guess it didn't work though, right? So how many years have you stayed?
Well, yeah, my mom made me feel a bit guilty at one point. So after 3 years at that public school, I went back home, and I worked at I tried to resettle in the U.S., but I guess I was too far gone or changed, or something had happened, and it was really hard for me to go back to that little town there. And I started a job at a rehabilitation. They the legal age in like Tennessee is like 17 or 18, but in the rest of the country it's like 19 before you're an adult. So they would send this van out all over the country, like these people that couldn't control their kids anymore, and because the age was like a year younger in Tennessee, they were still legally a child. So they would just like literally tackle these kids. Like the parents would call this company, and they would throw them in a van and drop them off out in this facility out in the middle of the woods where they didn't know how to escape. And then me and these other psych grads would run them through this program where they were constantly monitored and march them around. And I worked 14-hour shifts there. They taught me martial arts. When kids tried to escape, I had to chase them through the woods, tackle them, pin them down, get on a walkie-talkie, and they paid me $9.50 an hour to do that.
Yeah, man.
And yeah, I had to buy a car. I had they said no medical insurance for the first 3 months. Had to get somewhere to stay. It was pretty impossible. So I was like, I lasted 9 months, which I'm pretty proud of, and I was like, I'm getting out of here. And I considered going to Japan or somewhere else, but I ended up coming back to Korea just because it's so easy, and I had so many contacts here.
That's great. I think a lot of people who do end up staying here for a while or end up coming back have a pretty similar tale. It's just what you left isn't exactly as good as you remember it being, or it isn't as good as compared to what you found in Korea or wherever you're teaching. So do you think there's anything else you'd like to add? Any wisdom, any tidbits that you'd like to tell our listeners?
Yeah. I feel like I've talked too much, kind of uncomfortable to throw this all out there. So I hope I haven't bored anyone. If I can round that off with some advice or a tip, I would say, yeah, just follow your own compass. The mistakes I made were people that were kind of prescribing to me that life was a certain way, or that there are things you should do, such as come back home. So if you do find yourself teaching abroad, you just got to dive into it and kind of do your own thing, and don't listen to anybody. Like, learn by making your own mistakes, and you'll have an amazing time.
I think that's a great place to end it. Hal Thomason, thank you so much for sharing your experience with our listeners today.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Anytime.
And I'd like to also say thank you very much to the denizens of the PC Bong for sharing their little tidbits and letting us know when their character dies whenever they score a kill. It's added a much needed layer of personalities to this podcast.
We've got these guys are pros.
Oh, they're just going to town over there. I think I saw somebody with gold skin on their gun. I want to know how much you paid for it. All right, guys. Well, thanks for tuning in to the House of English podcast. We're going to continue doing interview series like this. So you've heard me talk, you've heard Hal talk, and you've heard our buddy Rhett Burton talk. He's one of the godfathers of the entrepreneur study room owners in Korea. We're going to continue talking about stuff like that, and we're always going to give you some good advice. As always, go to houndsevenglish.com to get your hands on some pretty awesome materials. And lately, we've been producing a lot. We'll send you a link for those down below. So, once I get around to updating these descriptions, which I've never been doing that much, my apologies, I will put a download link down there, and you can get your hands on whatever our latest. All right, thanks for tuning in.